Going on, everyone? John Matrix here. So we took a look at the Imperium's 10 best jobs. So I guess let's take a look at the Imperium's 10 worst jobs here today. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take a look at the Imperium's 10 worst jobs, Warhammer 40k lore history by Luton. No real major announcements. Like I said, I updated some stuff in the member section. So there's some new rewards up there, so if you guys want to go up there and take a look at them, see if there's anything that you fancy. If you want to give me some feedback on anything else you'd like to see in there, please do. Would love to hear that. And then next Saturday, the 9th, is when we're going to do the first community game night here. We're going to play some Darktide. So yeah, anyone that can show up, we're going to start probably around 5 p.m. Eastern and go for maybe 4 to 6 hours. I'm gonna do my best to get everyone in who shows up that wants to play. If you don't want to play and you just want to come and hang out, you know, in either my YouTube or Twitch stream chat, you know, feel free to come hang out, say hello, meet some new people, have a good time. There's a link down below in the description for my Discord channel. So if you guys want to join my Discord, you know, we hang out in there, play some games, etc., etc. Feel free. So yeah, December 9th, probably around 5 p.m. next Saturday, or not this coming Saturday, but the Saturday after. We'll do some Darktide, and I'll do my best to get everyone in who comes into play. I plan on doing maybe like 1 or 2 games with, you know, a group of people, and then just trying to rotate people in and out, depending on how many people show up. So we'll see how that goes. But anyway, enough of all that stuff. Let's get into the video here. Imperium's 10 worst jobs. In the grim darkness of the future, there is only war. I don't know, my voice gets like older and weirder every time. When people forget their duty, they are no longer human. They become something less than beasts. They have no place in the bosom of humanity, nor in the heart of the Emperor. Let them die and be quickly forgotten. Yikes.
When we look at the lives of those serving the Imperium, we must also understand that it is assumed that all of their service is at the behest and honour of serving the Emperor of Man and the Imperium itself. Now, while the official line from the Administratum would be that to give yourself in whatever means are required for the betterment of the Imperium is a noble cause, just and above all else a required task, it's worth remembering that these people are still humans serving in the Imperium, not superhuman Astartes or fanatical religious
There's regular Joe Schmoes living their lives.
Worshippers or drug-crazed hive gang members, just your average person trying to stay alive and do the best that they can. Now, while undoubtedly citizens of the Imperium know that they give to a greater cause and are indoctrinated from birth into the imperial truth, at the same time you can't escape the harsh realities of some of the worst jobs imaginable for those poor saps who end up designated with such a plight in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. Also, I think a short disclaimer is in order. By our standards, most jobs in the Imperium are often not really what you would quantify as jobs. You might simply be compelled by your seniors toward a role that then becomes your lot in life. There's really no true unified...
It's almost kind of a version of slavery, really. I mean, it's just like, yeah, from what I understand so far, a lot of times you're assigned a role from early age, and unless you show some kind of proclivity, either you're physically exceptional, then maybe you have a chance of being recruited as an Astartes, or maybe you have an intellectual gift, then maybe you might be recruited for the Imperial Guard or some other kind of tasks. Rare, maybe a remote chance of being recruited as an Inquisitor if you show something exceptional as well. Maybe, if you're, show psyker talents, you might, be recruited for something like that. But otherwise, if you're just a regular person, from what I understand, like, your role is pretty much decided when you're younger. And a lot of times people have generational jobs where, your grandfather's grandfather did this, and they taught everyone down the line how to do whatever. And since that's what your family knows how to do, that's what you're gonna do.
Or standardized currency system.
Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's what I understand so far.
To do so would be challenging, if not impossible, given the distant scale and general instability of the Imperium as a whole. While hive cities, for example, may use credits within them, or other planets operate on a more basic bartering system, some even using coinage. There's also the throne Gelt, which is likely as close to being a universal payment as exists.
Yeah, that's something I was gonna ask, is what is currency like in... Is that something they go over? Like, is there actually like, is there just like a general credit system? Is there an actual like universal currency that gets used, but in some worlds other currencies get used? He said some places they mostly just do barter stuff, but I mean, yeah, what's like, is there any kind of currency? What's the economy like, I guess, if anyone knows that?
And this is often used by, say, rogue traders and inquisitors who are traveling between systems. Overall, though, there's no unified economic system. It's all based on tithes and requirements for the Imperium's needs. It's all fairly inconsistent. While some jobs are paid and unpaid, it's often unlikely that you're going to have a literal choice in what your assigned lot in life is. People aren't going to be going out to school and then choosing a vocation, although obviously for some jobs, some roles, some level of moderate education is required so that you can best interact with the materials and data slates that you're having to handle. But you as an individual are an unimportant speck in the grand scheme of the Imperium, and you will do what is required of you, because that is your reality. Moreover, most of the Imperium trades in commodities. This can be raw materials, military hardware, and very often humans. So more than likely you are an asset and will be utilized however the Imperium sees it. The best way to visualize currency in the Imperium is that it's all system specific for the most part, and within a hive, for one, you are likely never going to leave, and so its credit system would be very specific to that location.
So that answers the question.
Outside of that, think of it like company money. You get paid by the person you're working for, who then also happens to simultaneously produce all of your other requirements. So you then are being paid by and paying back into that same company. It's a good way to basically regulate what the citizenry are using and ensure that everybody gets their fair or perhaps basic requirement share of things. Now you think you've got a worse 40k job in mind? Well, throw it down in the comments and maybe I'll include it in part 2 of this if I do a follow-up. And if you guys enjoy this and we open it up to even some more loose speculation for different parameters and different aspects of Warhammer 40,000, this could become an ongoing accompanying series. So now in no actual order of horror, to begin with, servitors. Now for reasons we won't get into...
I've said this before, like servitors just sound like the worst existence. Just... You know, like, slavery is awful in general, you know, but you're at a point where you don't even have free will in your mind. Like, you know, you've been lobotomized. You're just, are you even like really human at that point? You know what I mean? Like, you're basically just a husk that does what it's told.
To here within the Imperium, any advanced state of artificial intelligence is aggressively outlawed. So instead, the ever-ingenious humanity of the future has found a fantastic solution to get around this problem, because we are, after all, always such great problem solvers. The solution? Well, as is always the case, there is a plentiful supply of human plebs, criminals, and general undesirables. So how about we part lobotomize them, hopefully they get the gift of being mind-wiped, and then fuse what's left of their still living but now eviscerated carcasses into a somewhat functional cyborg. It's not really AI and it's not really human. Problem solved, everybody's happy. Except likely the unwilling participants of becoming a servitor. Servitors are a vital part of the Imperium, carrying out tasks too dangerous or too enduring for humans to want to take on the role. Although if no servitor were available and push comes to shove, you know that somebody's going to have to install that hyper-dangerous fuel system, and it's not going to be any officer types. While servitors are questionably necessary, they are a sad and incredibly depressing portrait of the dark future. And it's very questionable, given the fairly immoral state of humanity in the 41st millennium, just how well lobotomized these individuals are if they're not mind-wiped. Servitors, while carrying out their instructed functions if left to their own devices, have been seen to become confused and disorientated, sometimes found in a lost corner of a starship or missing in the maze of a hive city, babbling to themselves with a sea of incomprehensible speech with perhaps some scant details of their former selves and former lives, perhaps trying to formulate some cognition or sense of who they were before. Worse still, we hear stories of people who undergo surgery appearing to be under anesthetic, but are in fact just paralyzed and fully conscious. So it broaches the possibility that some or even many servitors are actually full.
That's actually like one of my like nightmare scenarios, is like having to go in for a surgery and they put you under for anesthesia. Because I mean, there are cases where this happens where they give you the anesthesia, you know, your body functionally can't move, but you can still feel stuff. You're still conscious and you can still feel everything. Like, that is like a nightmare scenario, like just being paralyzed and being, you know, able to still just feel every little thing that's happening to you, all the pain, everything. Like, oh, no thank you, brother. No thank you.
Fully aware of the lives they are living and with full awareness and memory of even their former lives, but who then simply lack the ability to speak or even control their own bodies, trapped in a silent, monotonous and potentially unending agony in the prisons they have been physically melded into.
That's just awful.
One of probably the most common and unpleasant tasks to partake in within the Imperium would be working in its vast factories. Now, planets with hive cities will usually be spattered with important resources, and their factories will then churn out any number of processed materials necessary for the functioning of their hive and or required by order of the Imperium off-world. The administrators and governors will not care how these orders are fulfilled, only that they are completed on time as required. This subsequently means the conditions for workers are just about as awful as you could imagine. Toxic, acrid air, long 20-hour shifts, token pay, and squalid, cramped living conditions. Still, for most people at this level of society, it's probably the best they could hope for. Upward mobility is not a thing, and the only other options being to slip into vagrancy and an underhive of horrors. Even then, this is a class of citizen who no one will blink an eye if somebody goes missing for whatever horrible reason, and still grinding day after day in a factory of hot, dangerous, and likely condemning you to a slow, agonizing death as your body is ravaged by fulfilling your work quota, coupled with the slow poisoning it receives every day, is hardly an appealing alternative, but it's the best that many can hope for. An Imperial guardsman. Now, while a guardsman...
I think this would be like... Maybe you're wrong, but before he goes further. But I feel like this might be like one of the best of the worst things that you could be an Imperial guardsman. Because at least you get like... You probably get at least slightly better quality of food and care, you know? Because you are an actual soldier and you're out fighting. And you at least get to go like places and explore things and see new things. And you probably have, you know, some maybe minute level, but still you have some respect, you know, because you are a soldier and you're out there fighting. But, you know, you're still just a regular Joe Schmo with like a las gun, and, you know, you're not really going to be able to do much against an orc or a Tyranid or whatever. But I would rather be a guardsman than, you know, a servitor or working in one of those Imperial factories with no hope, maybe not even seeing the, you know, light of a sun for days or weeks or months at a time, you know what I mean?
Is obviously an honourable and respected role for those in the Imperium, because frankly anybody forced to face down a 40-foot high lumbering alien killing machine who will in all likelihood either cleave you in two, strip the skin from your body leaving you running around screaming like a skinned animal, or just bludgeon you to a pulp, or maybe bombard you with projectiles full of acidic boring maggots, deserves a reasonable level of respect, even if that service was in fact non-consensual. As with many military roles in the Imperium, guardsmen serve with a duality of horrific warfare experience coupled with unceasing immortal honor. Because of the extreme casualty rates, most guardsmen are equipped with simply a lasgun, because why give them more than that when they're not going to be around to use it? A lasgun being a weapon often referred to as a flashlight because of its extremely poor effectiveness against the severe threats faced by the Imperium. Other heavy weaponry for its soldiers are available, as well as some devastatingly powerful tanks, ordnance and air support, but for your average man on the ground, bad luck, you get the lasgun. While Imperial propaganda will tell the glory of serving in the Imperium, the reality is fairly disconnected from this stirring and glorifying rhetoric. The phrase battle of attrition comes quickly to mind for many guardsmen who will not receive much if any personal body armor, unlike their superhuman Astartes saviors, Nope, you're going into battle with the shirt on your back, and as an individual, no one is going to be stopping to help you when you lose a limb or worse.
Right.
And the word expendable will be very much on your commander's lips. Now, if it isn't bad enough that you're facing a nightmarish host of Xenos, your commissar will be standing right behind you, ready to kill you or your newfound friends on the slightest hint.
Pretty much kind of Russian World War II-esque, you know, kind of a feeling where if you're not moving forward, the dude behind you is just going to kill you and take your gun.
Of your hesitation, or perhaps simply to just motivate those around you. Unless you have qualified for a specialist division or an elite force within the Guard, you're more than likely going to become Operation Human Shield. And if by some miracle you manage to survive the horrific conditions of battling alien horrors with little more than a gun that shoots light, having watched many around you die in the most unbearable of circumstances, and then still have your sanity intact, not to mention, hopefully, not having your body be completely broken, there's nothing to say that an orbiting Astartes or Inquisition may not simply decide that things are not going quite as well as they'd expected, and decide that in fact an orbital bombardment might best serve the fast resolution of the situation.
Or even if things do go right, but you're fighting, you know, legions of chaos demons, they might think you're corrupted and just wipe you out anyway. Even if you're successful, you push them back, you wipe the planet of the demons, you guys are susceptible to corruption. Too bad. Too bad, so sad.
And your service is appreciated, Guardsman.
Exterminatus.
If you feel like you're having a bad day and want to voice your concerns to those around you, this is not advisable. Commissars will be standing by to silence you for potentially damaging unit morale. But like so many aspects of the Imperium, the most hollow element is the fact that in serving your family, your planet, and your Imperium, you will not be remembered, and will be 100% left behind if the situation warrants it. You will not be receiving a flashy service, or your family informed of your demise. You are but one of millions upon millions of soldiers, and while some planets are focused around specialist skills and military training, many more are unwitting or even unwillingly drafted. You will not receive special genetic engineering, you get your gun, your orders, and a direction to advance. Now get on with it, Guardsman, before your own officer shoots you for failure to follow command. Next, in direct contrast, is the dull monotony of bureaucracy. You are the grease and oil in the machine as an administrative scribe. While many lives in the Imperium are pain-ridden and lives of frustrating physical agony, there is an argument to be made that endless perpetual administration is equally unbearable. The role of an administrator or an administrative scribe is to perpetually carry out tasks that must seem simply entirely pointless in the grand scheme of things. Your day
a life full of pointless, monotonous tediacy. If, you know, like, just sitting here end on end doing little minute, like, hundreds or thousands of little minute tasks all the time, not being able to really, again, go out and do anything else. Like, that's all your life is 24/7, is just doing these little small administrative oversight, you know, tasks. Death by boredom, essentially.
Out tasks that must seem simply entirely pointless in the grand scheme of things. Your daily tasks lost amid a vast ocean of information. Your whole being lost in reams and reams of paper trails, and even the purpose and intent of your tasks are potentially lost to meaning, or possibly even no longer required, having been long forgotten about. Billions of clerks, scribes, and general admin staff work tirelessly to manage the Imperium at every tier. Compared to others, this may seem like a sweet job to land yourself, but imagine having to do the same thing every day, without end, without opportunity, and without meaning. In many respects, it's the closest thing to hell for many. Pointless tasks with no thanks or appreciation, no sense of really contributing anything to the greater whole, cold, harsh working conditions, still subject to the same brutal rules and regulations that dictate all Imperial life. Indeed, the very nature of the complex bureaucracy that is strictly enforced allows little room for error. Regulations, forms, protocols, and process is your life. Worse perhaps is to live a life of blind ignorance of the goings-on beyond the walls and confines of your endless daily data processing. Many administrative positions are considered hereditary as well, so you'll be committed to a life of permanent placement facing logic engines and cogitator workstations. For an administratum scribe working in their specific sub-departments, all must be recorded, catalogued, completed in quadruplet, processed, and then as long as centuries later,
completed in quadruplet. No, not only do you have to do it once, you have to do every task 4 times to make sure that it's done right and backed up properly. Oh, that sounds awful.
Finally archived. The whole process is grindingly slow and dull beyond the strongest possible interpretation of the word. And as a final insult, you must fulfill your role accurately and efficiently for the entirety of your servitude.
Yeah,
Failure
just
to
gonna
do
kill
so
you.
risks intervention by the Inquisition. Administrative departments who have failed to maintain an acceptable level of efficiency, or worse, make a catalogue of errors, may be subject to mass summary executions by Inquisitors for crimes against the Imperium.
Honestly, at some point in time, that might be preferable, man. Like, if you've been doing that same thing for like 40, 50 years plus, man, and you're just like so over, it's like, just kill me now, man. I'm done. I can't do this anymore.
As a simple
Like, I would not be surprised if there are a lot of people that just don't have like psychological breaks or something like that and just go nuts.
cog in a machine, you could also unknowingly participate in a scheme of upward conspiracy and corruption and be judged for this without even having been aware of doing so. A thankless, soul-destroying job where you'll likely never see anything beyond the incarcerated walls of your administrative vault sector. Now, the human batteries, otherwise known as psychers, used to fuel the Emperor atop of his golden throne. Unsanctioned psychers are continually hunted by the Imperium, and when discovered they will likely be transported off-world to return to Terra in what are referred to as the much-feared Black Ships. As an unsanctioned psyker, you'll be assigned to one of 2 roles for the Imperium: training to a full operating psyker, or a psychic human battery to fuel the Emperor and the Astronomican's daily required injection of psychic power. Unsanctioned psychers represent a great threat to populations as they run the risk of unwittingly becoming a portal for demonic incursion, and those imprisoned within its cavernous, permanently dark, freezing cold holds on the journey back to Terra, with thousands of other unfortunate members being probably the most harrowing part of the ordeal, as these untrained psychers will expel their panicked and fraught emotions all around them. As such, only the most mentally strong Sisters of Silence will crew these vessels so as to be able to withstand the constantly soul-numbing despair of the incarcerated amateur psychers. For the majority of these poor souls, upon reaching Terra itself, their fate will be psychic disintegration as they're consumed by the Emperor and the Astronomican, their very mind, soul and body being consumed in agonizing psychic fire, and their bodies and brains are burned to ashes. But it does keep the Imperium's lighthouse lit for another day at least.
I guess the question that I would have too is, does the Emperor willingly like accept those souls, or just does, like, in his state, being that he is basically dying, you know, he's basically just a corpse on the throne with just his spirit kind of, you know, potentially he's in some way stronger, you know, his psychic powers, you know, maybe even greater than what they were before, and, you know, there's potential that he's actually even battling the chaos gods and the warp itself right now, you know, in his state. But, like, is he accepting these souls willingly, you know? Does he know that if does anyone know that, you know, he knows that he's, you know, taking the souls of these things in order to keep powering this thing? And, like, because, like, you know, trying to think of what I'm trying to think of, because, like, basically the idea that he was trying to create, you know, a connection to the webway so that they could not have to use the warp to travel anymore. So, like, I guess the question is that still something that is, I guess, somewhat happening even in his state? Like, psychically, is he still working towards that in his current state? You know what I'm saying? Like, are those souls still fueling his ability to create that, or is that just, you know, is that a non-thing anymore? Like, and again, yeah, just is the Emperor aware that he's being fed these things, and is he taking them willingly, etc., etc., etc.? And, like, I guess if anyone knows, you know, what is the end game to this? You know, is because obviously feeding him these souls is keeping his body alive, but I believe it's also just making his psychic abilities even stronger. And, you know, being that he is a perpetual, you know, supposedly if he dies, he will just be reborn again. So, is that also the case where because he's been fed all these souls, the next time he dies, will he be even more powerful when he gets reborn? You know, is that like the next step? Is that the next thing that's the next major event that could potentially happen in the 40K universe is, you know, the Emperor's actual death and then rebirth? Because I think that would be an interesting place for them to go story-wise with a lot of things, to be like the actual Emperor's death finally, and seeing how that would obviously like really negatively affect the Imperium. There could be a second Age of Strife because warp travel would be much more difficult, being they don't have that North Star there anymore. But it could also potentially allow Gilliman to make some more reforms on certain things. And then, of course, eventually it could lead to the Emperor's, you know, second coming, I guess, and being even more powerful and leading humanity into a brighter future, you know, quote unquote. So, but I guess, yeah, a question is the Emperor like willingly accept these souls, or is he being essentially force fed? And, you know, what is, I guess, the end game to this? There might not be an end game, I guess. It's just this is all they know as a way to keep him alive, so that, you know, they have travel through the warp and they don't know. Because, again, supposedly, you know, the Emperor, even in his state, psychically whispers to certain people of, like, this council. And, you know, it's also a question of, are these people interpreting things? Are they actually fulfilling the wishes of the Emperor, or are they not? Are they doing their own thing? You know, so I don't know. I just there's a lot of different you know, interesting ideas that I have in ways that I could see this story potentially going. But anyway, let's continue.
An unpleasant but perhaps at least highly appreciated task to carry out in your service for the Imperium is that of refueling a starship warp drive. And this has scant documentation on who specifically carries out this role, but it is described as being similar to a funeral procession. Those chosen to carry out the task will begin by leaving an airlock to...
Yeah, I believe isn't refueling this like basically just a death sentence? Like you're willingly gonna die, and you know that's what's gonna happen.
Across the service deck of a ship, wearing robes of grey metallic thread connected up with valves of long cabling, all wearing thick lead gloves as they carry their heavy metal caskets upon their shoulders. The service staff's eyes, nose and mouth will be similarly fitted with these connective valves, the unknown material they carry within these caskets evidently being extremely hazardous, for as these individuals cross to their objective, their flesh, skin will slowly cook and be burned away. This process being described by tech priests as the most perilous operation a vessel could undertake, barring actual combat. As the procession of staff would approach the warp drive central column, the casket carriers would become even further physically damaged and even start to disintegrate, but being driven perhaps by the chemicals and gases being infused into them as pain suppressors and some chemical concoctions to enable them to carry out such a task, they lumber forward. But the closer the carriers come to the drive itself, the more they begin to stagger and their metallic robes deteriorate. Their infused chemicals keeping them barely standing as their bodies begin to quite literally fall apart, chunks of flesh and matter falling from their person as they push on to deliver their fuel to the drive.
You would think they would have, maybe it's a resource issue, but you would think they would have, you know, technology and suits and things available that would protect them from such hazards, but maybe it's just so, because it's refueling a warp drive, so maybe it's, you know, I don't know what necessarily the right term is, so hazardous, so toxic, so noxious, whatever you want to call it, that there's just nothing that they can do. So yeah, they just drug them up to the point where they're like blitzed out of their mind, and they just kind of push them forward. I don't know.
The casket would be finally pushed into a socket of the drive column as some of the carrier's limbs would detach and strips of muscle and bone hang down from their gaping robes. Servitor.
And why wouldn't they be able to make like some of this stuff like automated? You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I guess that goes into the whole AI and technology and spirit, you know, talking to the spirit of the machine and yada yada. So I don't know. I guess there could be issues with that.
Like
So
machines would collect the remains of the carriers and scrape these into yet more caskets before tech priests offer prayers to the machine god. With the last great effort, the final casket bearers would load their fuel into the drive before the doors would rapidly shut. The robed shells would now be retracted to the entry point, and the ship's captain might be heard to utter, "Emperor, preserve us," before finally turning away from the harrowing scene playing out on the engineering deck of their starship. Imagine life in something like the 13th century, essentially the Middle Ages, where anything like 90% of the population spend all of their time.
see, I feel like a life on a feudal world wouldn't be like awful. I mean, in comparison to a lot of other things, because I mean, like, yeah, you're in a feudal society, and yeah, medicine and technology aren't great. You're basically like kind of back, you know, and like I don't know what the time period would be comparable to, you know, like the 1400s or earlier kind of a situation, you know, with, you know, knights and horses and all that kind of stuff, and, you know, brick, stone, masonry work, etc., etc. But, you know, at least I would think that your life would be pretty much your own in this kind of a situation. You know, if you're a farmer, you have your land, you farm your land, you live your life much like a normal person would have back, you know, in the 1400s, earlier time periods. You know, it would suck, it would be hard work and labor, but, you know, your land is yours, your house is yours. Well, I guess maybe, I guess potentially not. You know, you might have just been given a plot of land by whatever feudal lord is there, and you work the land for him. But still, you know, you'd have your own place, you'd have your own family, you'd have your probably, I would assume, freedom of movement and what you're doing, as long as you're meeting your quotas of, you know, making food and you know, contributing. So I would think that living on one of these feudal planets might not be, you know, all that bad in comparison to a lot of other jobs.
Time every day working the land. This is life on a feudal world. There are a few citizens with specific jobs working stone and metals, but your average person's life is doomed to endless hard labour. This physically destroying job is carried out from dawn to dusk, year-round, with the populace likely surviving on a meagre supply of its own productivity. A high mortality rate of disease and infection, industrial accidents with primitive machinery, or domestic complications like no medicine to prevent women from dying in childbirth. This all in and of itself sounds hard enough of a life, but imagine if you...
It surprises me too, though, that like medicine and stuff like that would be an issue, you know, even because, like, yeah, let's say you have worlds that are just straight up farm worlds like that, but they're still in an era of that has specific technology and medicines and ways of doing things. So it surprises me that they wouldn't have access to them. You know, maybe they're on just so far out fringes of the galaxy that it's complicated to get medicines to them on a regular basis, so they have to stockpile them up and they have to ration them out. So it's a situation where, you know, maybe only like the lords or whatever, you know, have priority, and it's very low priority for the basic person to get stuff, you know, etc.
will, the job of a feudal gong farmer. Now, what is this scintillating job? Well, it's collecting the mess of medieval latrines and cesspits,
Nice.
bringing it manually outside of a city or a town to be used as fertilizer for farming. You do get the privilege of searching through the waste if you choose to find any valuables, and by the way, you also have to work only during the night. And here's hoping you don't pass out from the fumes you're inhaling and potentially drown in the stuff you're having to rake out every night. And for those on a feudal world, to top it off, an Imperial administrator will be watching from an orbital platform, and that's about all the defenses your planet has. So let's hope no blood-crazed orcs, hungry tyrannids, or immoral demons come wandering by. If you thought working a feudal planet or in a factory from material processing in a hive was bad, don't be so ungrateful, citizen. You have a privileged life compared to those poor souls working in agri-processing. While this is going to vary from hive planet to planet, some of the worst of this is processing what's referred to as corpse starch and ration biscuits, both unpleasant in their own way.
That
As
sounds
populations
terrible.
for the massive ecologies known as hive cities become quite simply ridiculous, housing anything between 10 and 100 billion citizens, the need for sustenance is obviously difficult to provide for.
Yeah,
And
I
while you
would
may
say
be
so.
lucky enough to save up your credits and purchase a delicious chunk of rat meat, you're more than likely going to be enjoying some delicious ration bars or corpse starch. But how do workers produce such luxuries? Well, ration bars are best described as...
I mean, corpse starch just sounds like a terrible term. Like, I would assume that you're making some kind of ration from the corpses of other dead bodies that have been refined in some way and then turned into like a brick or something like that. That sounds nasty.
horribly greasy, generally unpopular, shockingly, and are biscuit bars to feed workers, serfs, and military forces. They're manufactured by harvesting bio-rich matter from ocean planets and worlds with seas, which then provides a protein-rich gruel. This, though, would be not enough to provide for the billions of citizens, so it must be instead fed to larvae of the Orochian bilefly. And when these larvae reach an optimal stage in their life cycle, when they're plump enough, the larvae are going to be pulped by workers and compressed down into the hard-to-stomach biscuit ration bars. The agri-workers doing this process will work in huge air-sealed pens that produce these plump fat larvae. If you're working in one of these places, then things are not going to be going well for you, and you're probably quite low down in your hive city as the stench and endless droning vibrations and material mechanical sounds of the bileflies is not one that many would choose to live with. Still though, it could be worse. You could be producing corpse starch, which is about as appealing as it sounds. This material is bland, filling, and relatively nutritious because it's basically reconstituted biomatter mixed with animals, plants, discarded organics, and of course rumoured to include human corpses as well. While this is undoubtedly frowned upon by various administrative departments of the Imperium, it's one of those things that a planetary governor is going to either sweep under the rug, play down, or full-on cover up. It's not
Right.
out and out a disclosed ingredient, but highly suspected that one way the population are able to be adequately fed is the mechanical reclamation of human biomatter, albeit then diluted by various
Disgusting.
other organic materials. It's like so many things in the Imperium, on the borderline of being acceptable. And when faced with limited options for feeding your population, the alternative being violent food riots, then it becomes a necessary evil. Pity though the workers who have to work in the stinking immoral environment where you must process endless stinking vats of biomatter, perhaps seeing some things that are going to be difficult to forget as you catch your eager 4 hours of rest before getting back into the production line. Now, I am yet to cover the assassins of the Imperium, but one aspect in being selected to work as an Imperial assassin is their pre-training. Now, as with most Imperial roles, it's quite unpleasant. But specifically, the role of the Eversa Temple, which disturbingly leans towards using the youngest recruits as they are less developed and therefore easier to bioadapt later in surgery. To start off with, most recruits will be orphans from a death world, of which there are quite unsurprisingly a plentiful supply in the Imperium. These recruits, after some base training, will be transported to Terra, but en route they will continue to be trained by a survival of the fittest assessment. These very young recruits will engage in what can best be described as an ongoing battle royale of wills, initiative, and resolve. Recruits are required to survive on minimal food, even minimal oxygen, for days on end, as well as continual forced fighting between themselves. This could be armed, unarmed, in near total darkness, or distracting aural and lighting conditions. Heat, cold, varying levels of gravity from the thin to the severe all will be factors in their assessment. When they eventually reach Terra, there could be anything below 1/10 of the original number of recruits who have survived this harrowing ordeal, or perhaps not at all if their assessors deem them unsatisfactory to requirements. The recruits, though, will then be organised by the temple they are best suited for. Eversa assassin recruits face, though, the further horror of being now forcibly bioengineered. These youngest recruits, who are essentially children, will be turned through this process into unstoppable drug-fueled killing machines. To achieve this, the Medicus adepts will use a range of genetic adaptation, endoskeletal restructuring, bionic implants, and infusions of chemicals to turn the previously human youth into a nightmarish weapon that can barely be controlled by its own leaders. Their cerebral cortex will also be enhanced and the brain fitted with Lobo chips. These will amplify the assassin's state of mind to either raging hate, pure determination, or extreme fanatical drive for the love of the Imperium at any cost.
Lord.
This whole process is unpleasant and far from risk-free.
Oh, unpleasant.
Many
Yeah,
subjects
that's
will
one way to
die
put it.
of massive multi-organ collapse as their bodies struggle to handle the severe restructuring. And this is not to mention the inevitable side effects from being turned into a bio-enhanced, drug-fueled, borderline if not psychotic killing machine. Past this point, the assassin will continually attempt to balance the complex cocktail of chemicals that's fueling and simultaneously poisoning their system. Finally, at the end of all this, the assassin will be placed in cryosuspension, their bodies so drug-fueled and their own mindset so completely unstable that it's easier than keeping them actively conscious. Before a mission, they're going to be placed into a drop pod and then fired down to achieve their task.
Yeah, they're literally just a tool, just a weapon. When their mission's done, they get frozen and put away into a locker, and then once they're ready again, they just, you know, shoot them out of a drop pod, and on the way down, they thaw them out. That also sounds like a terrible, terrible existence. That's on, like, the other end of the spectrum from the servitude, you know, servitor. Basically, it's a servitor that's just programmed to kill. Like, from birth, you're forced through these various trials that, you know, might just kill you on the way to Terra. And then once you get there, if you're selected, your body is torn apart and replaced with all kinds of augmentation and drugs. And again, you're not even yourself anymore. Like, you're just a tool. Like, again, like, that's the other end of the spectrum. There's, like, servitors here that have been lobotomized and are just unthinking, or potentially not even unthinking, but potentially you're just, you know, your consciousness is just trapped in a body that's no longer your own. You're basically a prisoner in your own flesh, and there's nothing you can do about it. You know, if the lobotomies don't go right. You know, to basically the same thing, but on the other end of the spectrum, like, you're so augmented and your mind is changed and enhanced and drug filled so much that all your entire existence, all you think and do is you just want to kill things. That's just it. You're just, you know, point me at something and I want to kill it. That's it.
Becoming an Eversor assassin is
Damn.
likely one of the worst jobs in the Imperium, as
Yeah.
your life is nothing but soul-destroying pain and servitude to be stripped of everything you were and used as an indiscriminate weapon of the Imperium. Now, penal legions are the dregs of Imperial society, so you can imagine these are some less than capable individuals. These are usually members of the Imperial Guard and PDF who have perhaps not been executed on the spot for their crimes and instead commuted to a life sentence in the loosest definition of the word. However, a penal legion can be easily made up of murderers, maniacs, thieves, in general criminal elements of society, or just those who were far too incompetent in their duties and have been sentenced to play some more mildly useful role for the Imperium. These legions, though, unfortunately, are basically the waste dump of human society and are forced to wear explosive slave collars that are more about turning the troops into human bombs than a disciplinary incentive.
Okay.
They march in a shambolic way towards their goal, or perhaps run if they're crazed, and then perhaps to just encourage those around them with whatever they're meant to be doing. Maybe a few of them will be blown up and detonated here and there. But is this the job we're talking about? Well, no. In fact, what we're actually sparing a thought toward are those tasked with maintaining control over these plebs. Penal Legion overseers essentially have the unfortunate task of herding a bunch of shambolic, potentially murderous and psychopathic cats. Some of the Penal Legion will relish their role and accept their death running headlong into the enemy, but others may fall into mental ruin, just falling to the floor crying, unable to move. Others may try to run away or simply just lash out and kill those standing around them. As frustratingly soul-destroying as such a task is, those commanding a Penal Legion are usually well versed in dealing out punishment, cruelty and incentives to their force, and will lay down brutal levels of discipline. Despite this professionalism though, it's still likely one of the most frustrating roles to have to command in, with a force who are potentially just as happy killing each other and themselves as they are the enemy. So now to finish, I'm going to have to break your immersion. But the truest worst job that could exist in 40k is, well, whatever you can draw from your own imagination. Because this might seem like a cop-out, but it's actually the real bedrock of 40k. Because while it has embedded canon and non-canon lore, it's also a world whereby you, as a participant, are encouraged to use your own imagination. The civilian life of the Dark Future is very poorly documented, and really we only have scraps of information compared to the endless raging warfest that is ongoing between various factions. The civilian life of the Imperium is perhaps one of the most interesting.
It would be interesting if someone kind of did that, just made, I don't know what kind of book, maybe a drama, maybe a thriller, I don't know, just some kind of book that, like, goes through the life of, like, a regular Joe Schmo person, you know, in the Imperium doing their normal job, and, you know, is witness to the various events around them, and it's from the perspective of that person, you know? Maybe an invasion from Tyranids or Orcs or the Chaos Demons, and them watching the Astartes or Imperial Guard come through and what they have to do to survive, you know, and just essentially, you know, the telling of the story from that perspective. That could be pretty interesting. You know, and the book could start off from, you know, them going through their everyday life, you know, how they interact or maybe are not able to interact with their family or friends or other coworkers. They might not have time to do so, or maybe there are certain periods where they have, you know, recreation or whatever, and they're able to do that, etc., etc. But I just think that would be pretty interesting, you know, maybe a book from that perspective instead of just, you know, a book from the perspective of, you know, the Astartes or whatever.
Aspects that exist in the 40k universe, and if Games Workshop will not expand upon it, maybe it's time we start doing so ourselves with some wild speculations and imaginings. The whole thing with 40k is that the Imperium itself is so fractured and spread across countless systems with vast distances in between, it's really hard to focus in on some of the details of different worlds. Now this has happened very, very slowly over time with little fragments of information, but some could be, for example, nightmarish gulags, while others could be verdant, lush garden worlds of pleasure. Others could be more Earth-like with all the complex goings-on of human life that this entails, or you could be living in a horrific hive city or toxic choking forge world. Or how about a planet that's being cut off from the Imperium due to a simple administrative error, forced to go its own way with the vague hope of one day being rediscovered if it's not destroyed by some other alien process in the meanwhilest. And this for me is one of the most enjoyable parts of Warhammer 40,000. You can use your own imagination to build a whole narrative given the existing lore and framework of the factions within it. Often the world of 40k draws on real world history, and it's something that I really love the idea of doing in creating whole descriptions of planets and locations that are non-canon and entirely fictional. Perhaps this is something I'll find time to do, perhaps it's something you guys would be interested in me doing. In the meanwhile, worst jobs canon or not, tell me down below what's the worst thing you can come up with. I'm probably going to regret asking that, but let's see. As always guys, thanks for watching and thank you for your support. I'll see you in the next one.
Each man executed is a man who can no longer serve, and to fail in service to the Emperor is the greatest of sins. Lehman Russ. Prime Mark of the Space Marine, or the Space Wolves. I don't know why I keep saying, I've been doing that lately. I mean Space Wolves, but I say Space Marines. I don't know. But there we go. That is the Imperium's 10 worst jobs, Warhammer 40k lore and history from Luton. I'll have the link to this video down below in the description, so if you want to go and check out his video without my commentary in there, go ahead and do so. And I'll also have a link to his channel down below, so you guys can go and check out, you know, all the content he's got out there. And, you know, if you aren't already subscribed to him, give him a subscribe. So, I mean, yeah, all these jobs sound awful. Most of them really just sound like a life of slavery of some sort. You know, the idea, you know, I thought servitors were bad before, but you know, the idea that a lobotomy can go wrong and you're actually, you know, still fully aware and conscious, but your body no longer is yours. You know, it's being controlled and run by, you know, these machines and automated tasks, and you actually have no free will and you're potentially aware and just trapped in your body. You know, that's awful. That's nightmare fuel, you know? That's yeah, that's just awful. But then to learn that basically on the other you know, side of the spectrum, the assassins are basically just servitors, but just reconfigured in another way. They're just kind of like reconfigured to be straight up killing machines. They're, you know, taken from childhood, maybe even from birth, you know, are sent through these little trials where they're, you know, essentially starved, forced to fight each other and kill each other, you know, and only the strongest survive, potentially, are, you know, brought into the assassins, you know, creed or whatever you want to call it. Oh. Only to then go through a similar process of having your body basically, you know, enhanced and augmented through all these cybernetic things and weapons and whatnot, and planted into you, and your brain is changed and augmented by cybernetic, you know, machines and stuff, and then you're psychologically, you know, messed up from all these drugs and chemicals and stuff they're pumping your body with. It's keeping your body alive, and you're just fueled by rage and hatred and a need to kill. Like, you're just turned into a tool that's just to kill and destroy things. It just, yeah. I think out of everything he's described in this video, the two best jobs out of the worst ones, the two that I would want to pick would be to either be, you know, a farmsman on a feudal world or a guardsman. Because, you know, as terrible as all those are, and as bad a life expectancy as you have with both of those, at least you're able to be, you know, on, like, as a farmer in a feudal, you know, world, at least you're able to work outside. You know, you can potentially have some times of fresh air. You can potentially have some times of, you know, relaxation and being with your family, and, you know, having a family to raise, and, you know, disease and basically all the complications and issues that were around back in feudal times in our life would be around there, you know. But, you know, at least you could have somewhat of a little bit of free will and somewhat of existence to do other things potentially, you know. And then as an Imperial Guardsman, you know, you at least have a little semblance of respect and adoration, and you get to, you know, at least potentially travel around and see different worlds. Probably have a little bit of better care and food, you know, rations and whatnot given to you. So, I mean, you probably have, at least overall, for the life that you have, it's at least somewhat of a better life until, you know, you're thrown out to the wolves, essentially, and, you know, you're fighting God knows what, and, you know, you have basically a flashlight that you're just shining at a Tyranid or something like that, and then you get eaten. You know? Oh. But, yeah. It sounds like, for the most part, the most lives that people have in the Imperium of the 41st millennium sound awful. It just basically sounds like you're a slave to the machine of the Imperium, you know, and that's it. You know, and then God forbid you're born, you know, with psyker abilities, and if you're unsanctioned and you don't conform, I don't know what the process is of, if you're born as a psyker, how you get to become sanctioned. You know, I don't know if that's something that's like before birth that even happens, like they go through like an actual breeding process of like putting, you know, male and female psyker together, and they're trying to breed psykers. You know, I don't know if that's what sanctioned psykers are considered, or what. But I mean, yeah, you're hunted down by the Inquisitors and, you know, whatever other factions, and, you know, you're either killed or you're just fed to the Emperor, you know. And not only is your body destroyed, but at that point your soul is gone too. So yeah, life and existence in the 41st millennium for the average person, pretty rough. But that's gonna do it for this video, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you guys very much. If you're watching here this video all the way through to the end, it means a lot. Thank you very much for watching it all the way through. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and a sub. Like I said earlier, we got some new member benefits up on the members section, so if you want to check those out, feel free to. If you want to let me, give me any kind of feedback, is there any other things you'd like to see in those membership sections, the membership tiers, let me know. And again, on December 9th, we're going to be doing a game night in Darktide. So those of you who are interested that want to show up, whether you just want to play or hang out and chat and just have a good time, or in Discord or whatever, feel free. The link to my Discord will be down below, and hopefully I'll see a good bunch of you guys then. But for now, hope you guys are having a wonderful day wherever you are and whenever you're watching this, and I will see you guys on the next one. Have a good one, everybody.